Now today, I have to tell you, panelists you have are superstars in the business community and legal community, and they're friends of mine. Panelists, feel free, even though a question's directed to one person, jump in. There's no rules here. I will try to stay out, but you know that I can't.
That's impossible.
So knowing that you do a lot of work with human rights and employment, I'd like to start first by thanking you for bringing a voice to those who have been silenced by their oppressors in the workplace. Unequal employment opportunities between men and women have been an ongoing issue for as long as time can tell, with men consistently being the dominating force in nearly every industry. Recently, there have been significant feminist movements seeking to even this playing field. In response, many companies have moved towards affirmative action programs to rectify the systemic injustice that has been deeply rooted throughout history. Much of this has been done through companies actively hiring more women than men for positions. Though men, and white men in particular, have proven to be the beneficiaries of the single greatest affirmative action program in the world, which is known as the history of the world, many still feel entitled to these positions. As a woman with vast knowledge of human rights and employment law, what is your response to these men, and how do you feel we can go about effectively increasing the amount of women in the workplace?
Okay, so I could take the entire session for that, and I won't. So it's interesting how many men, and just people in general, when they see any kind of preferential hiring, and that can be as soft as saying, we're going to focus on creating and increasing a pipeline of women, a pipeline of minorities, a pipeline of Indigenous students, will say, well, that is reverse discrimination. And we are all guilty of this in that we do not see the privileges with which we are born. And I think that even people who aren't necessarily from the Rogers or the Bronfmans or the Reichmans, if you're in this country and you have access to post-secondary education, you have some degree of privilege, and we don't realize that. And so we see the hard work we put into something, and we earn our positions, and we don't necessarily see the advantages that we were given that helped us get there. And one of the things that we need to do is gently get away from this idea that every time a white man or gets a good job and does well and earns well and gets a prize or is promoted, that that was solely on some kind of abstract idea of merit. And that every time a woman or a minority or an Indigenous person or a person with a disability got there, that it's because, as somebody told me to my face, you must have slept with the professor, or because I'm a token. So I want to give you two personal, because I can't solve the problems of the world in, 5 minutes. Two stories that I tell. One is when the the bar associations were discussing women in the legal profession, I had a very honest person saying, aren't you worried that people will perceive you as a token? And my answer was, you will make that mistake once, but you will not make it twice. So that's number one. In other words, sometimes you hire me as a token, it's not my favorite concept, but I'm just as worthy. I know internally that I am just as worthy as the guy who got the job because his dad is on the board of directors. That's a form of affirmative action too. And so I'm just going to take that opportunity and I'm going to run with it. And no one has ever made the mistake of thinking I'm on a board or I'm at court because I'm the token minority. Number two, I've seen affirmative action from white, particularly rich, well-connected white people, because we don't talk about class in our country as much as we should, and class is a huge barrier. Poverty is a huge barrier, and it cuts across, surprisingly, many, many of the other protected grounds. And I've seen people get jobs, people keep jobs, people make partner because they were members of, forgive me for saying this, the Lucky Sperm or the Lucky Ova Club. You can figure out what I mean. So how do we combat that? We have an open discussion about how hiring isn't neutral. How we can't always assume that decisions are made on some kind of scientific, pure meritocratic basis, and that we do have bias in the system, and the only way to correct for that bias is to be honest about that bias, whether it's conscious or unconscious, and that this is our imperfect way of trying to do so.
I'm a very glass half full type of person. So, my reaction to that is a fact of life, and I work in an extremely male-dominated industry. However, our CEO, who founded GFL, is 38 years old. He is a young white man, but he is a driven young white man, and he got there from being extremely capable. And his perspective on hiring is, I don't care who you are, if you're capable, I'm gonna hire you. And working for somebody like him, and then, so what happens, and some of the way you combat that is, they look around and they go, oh, we need a treasurer. And I go, I have the right person for you. It's a woman. She's my friend. We're hiring her. So she comes in, okay? And then, the next person I hire in my legal department is a woman. She happens to be a racialized woman because she's a great, really talented, smart, capable person. I hire her. And then I say to her, we need to hire another young woman, another young lawyer. And so she reaches out to her network, and we hire another racialized woman who happens to be internationally trained, right? So not, trained in Canada, right? So that's, I think that there's a lot of, opportunities to fix the problem within organizations. So I think that there are lots of positive signs ahead for women to be able to reach, as you say, men have always done this. They've reached out to their networks and they brought people into the organization. But as you bring women into organizations at higher levels where they have the ability to do that you're going to see much more change, and that we begin to have the voice to be able to change that within organizations. So I feel very positive about the opportunities for women and for diversity generally, because I think that those opportunities are becoming more and more available. Now, I've been around for a long time, right?
Yeah, we both have.
I was called to bar in 1983. That was a long time ago, right? And the world
I'm not telling when I was called to bar.
And I was 10 at the time I was
Yes,
called to bar, right?
exactly.
And the world has changed a lot since then. It is really, it is getting to be a better place. Workplaces, when I started, I was often the only woman. I'm still often the only woman in board meetings and various things, and I get sometimes occasionally people turn to me and say, could you get the coffee? And I say, I don't think so, right? But, apart from that, there are lots of positive signs, so I will.
So there's so many things that we need to talk about here, and I'm sure you want to get to a second question.
Yeah, maybe.
But you know what? I'm going to take the other side for a minute.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you that I'm looking out for the young men in this room and the young men that are out there looking for successful positions, because I believe...
Because you're a mother of two guys.
Because I'm a mother of two guys that need all the help they can get. But kidding aside, and Ralph knows the story, which is why he said that, and I'm only going to take 30 seconds so we can move on. But I think the pendulum has swung too far. And Joy, what you were saying kind of is what prompted me to speak up, because what you were saying, and I respect it wholeheartedly, was, well, you bring in women, and then a woman will bring in another woman, and that woman will bring in her other...
Okay, we hired a man in the group. We hired two men in the group.
Awesome,
Okay.
awesome. But that's what used to happen with the guys network. And then the pendulum swung in an amazing way so that young, bright women were able to get into great positions. We have to start equalizing it a little bit. So my Marni way of doing things now, I'm looking for the young men to hire. Because my sons said to me, Mom, what's with you always helping the girls? Why are my friends always coming over for your advice? Aren't you going to help me get a summer job? Aren't you going to help me? And I said, no, you go to the golf course with Dad and you'll meet people. And exactly what we were talking about, different classes, different ability to access people. I said, so, you've got ways to get network. These girls don't. And my son looked at me and he said, how dare you? That's what he said. He said, how dare you think that young men don't still need some sort of guidance, mentorship, leadership? So I wanted to just balance the conversation to say that I think all of us four sitting up here and people that have spent a couple of years in real life, we have to simply look out for our younger generation And our younger generation is made up of diversity, is made up of men, women, gender-neutral folks. I mean, I can go on and on with the list. And so just to leave it there, I think we have to remember all the time that people are just bright out there, and let's pick the right people.
First of all, thank you for coming out today. My question is that figures from Statistics Canada, taken in November 2017, show that women earn significantly less than their male counterparts. Across all fields, women holding a bachelor's degree had a median income of $68,000 in 2016, while men with the same level of education earned $82,000. The push for gender equality has been happening everywhere in Canada, in virtually all levels of institutions. And my question to you is, why do you think that this gender gap continues to persist, and what do you think females can do to counteract this? Thank you.
Thank you, great question. I think that us women have to continue doing exactly what you women in this class are doing right now. You have to get the best possible education. You have to go out there, and that you have to borrow Ralph's Rolodex. And by that, I mean, do you even know what a Rolodex is?
It's okay, it's a metaphor
it's your
for an
contact
Outlook
list.
contact list, yes.
Networking. We women have to do and continue doing all the things that the guys knew how to do 25 years ago. And I feel that if we go out and we prove ourselves in the same manner, and you guys are going to get the theme. I mean, I feel very strongly that we've almost reached a level of equality. We're not equal, but I do believe that we're approaching a level playing field. And in order for us to continue the success, and I'm sort of taking my ladder slowly up, in order to continue that success, we have to just continue to do the things that men before us kind of just always knew what to do, because we were previously, in prior generations, expected to stay home and raise the kids. And now I hope we get into some of those discussions about how we can attain work-life balance, because it is very attainable. I won't go into that dialogue because I'm sure you want to talk about it after.
Well, we got questions on work-life
Okay, good,
dialogue.
good.
And
We'll
even
get
if we
to it.
don't, you'll get to it.
I will
know
get
you
to
will.
it. I absolutely will. So to answer your question specifically, we are reaching a place where there should be equality in salaries at all levels, except for the C-suite. And by C-suite, I mean chief executives' offices. And not because I don't think we have gotten as much success there. I think the success has occurred so that the women are moving their way up the ladder. So in order for more and more to get to the C-suite, we have to get more coming up the ranks to get into senior positions so that they could make it there. So everything I've said is at a vice president level down. And I do think there is still a level of difference at the more senior levels. And it is up to us women to lobby for what we believe in, to point out the discrepancies in salaries, to not feel that we don't have a voice. We have a voice. What you'll probably read in some of your readings, women are more likely to be accepting of a job offer that's presented to them. And Neena, you're way more attuned to all this. Women likely get it. They go, oh, it's a pretty good offer. I'm so excited about this job. I'll take it. Whereas a man, I think, and I'm stereotyping.
Yeah, no. There's actually proof. This is a stereotype, but there's evidence.
A man said, like, screw this. I'm not accepting $68,000. I deserve $75,000. And guess what? They go in, they fight for it, and they get it. So we have to encourage the women to feel that they have a voice. The job offer is not going to be retracted just because, bless you, just because you are trying to get a better salary.
If I could give a tip to the women in this room, and maybe some of the men who are a bit shyer, because sometimes you come from a culture.
Kind of like me, shy.
Oh yeah, right, Ralph. You're my exemplar, shy, and a picture of Ralph Lean. It is important to learn how to respectfully request that your compensation be reviewed. And I am really bad at this, but this time when I did my partnership units, I went through and I put the time in to look at the files where I did not feel I got appropriate credit. And I put it with $1 and I put it in my submissions. And I looked my senior partner in the eye and I said, I expect there to be a significant increase because of my contribution. I don't have the whole picture, so I don't know what that increase should be, but I expect you to keep that there is a significant ask in there. If you want me to keep doing this, and you want me to do with this for these kinds of clients, and you want to advertise these kinds of clients, I expect to be, do that. Now, it took me almost 30 years to work up the courage to do that. I am telling you, that is 29 wasted years. So you guys in this room have to learn, depending on whether you're in a law firm or you're in corporate Canada or you're in government, what is the way to respectfully ask? I'm not trying to blame women, always for it, because there's lots of, evidence of, bias. But the only way you can combat that bias is by pushing the issue. I agree with Marni. I was so delighted to be given an offer and so delighted that you guys wanted me that it didn't occur to me to negotiate back. And I'm a really good negotiator for my clients. I'm a lousy negotiator for myself. And I think that's true for many women. So there you go.
So the question is, since your call to the bar in 1983, or perhaps more specifically, since 1997, when you began to serve as a in-house counsel, have you noticed any change in the culture of businesses in regards to welcoming more women into senior roles? Also, knowing from history how difficult it has been and still is for women to break through the glass ceiling, what concerns do you have for people of the LGBT community, and do you think they could face similar challenges in the future?
So I think I talked about the first part of your question about that I have seen a big change certainly since 1983 and certainly since 1997. But in terms of the LGBTQ community, it's a bit harder to say. So when I was in law school, there were a number of people who were gay, and some openly and some not openly. And I know that they have gone on to have very successful careers in law, in various positions, different kinds of law firms. And their approach might have been differently towards their sexuality and how open they were about it.
I like to believe, I want to believe, that being a member of the LGBTQ community has absolutely no bearing whatsoever on whether you're going to get a position somewhere or not. I feel very strongly about that, even more than whether you're a man or a woman. Because to me, I feel that we being corporate Canada, have now moved towards, and including the way, whether I like him or not, our current Prime Minister's views are, I think that is top down. And I think that is telling corporate Canada, we want to see equality, we want to see diversity, and we don't care what goes on in the bedrooms. So I can tell you from my own organization, Infrastructure Ontario, we have, off the top of my head, that I can think of 3 individuals, 2 women, 1 man, who are in senior executive positions that come from that community, and there's no difference between them and me, none. And I hope that continues elsewhere.
I will tell you that the immediate past president of the Advocate Society, which is an old conservative, not politically conservative, but litigation and barristers association, was Brad Berg, who is an openly gay, incredibly successful litigator, and it really didn't matter one bit to anyone. And so the generation in front of you has made a big difference. So maybe I'm the optimist, but the optimist that sees the long to-do list, because I'm in charge of that to-do list. And so, yeah, you're right. We've got stuff to do there.
Being not only a woman, but also a minority in the business world, there's no doubt that you have seen all forms of discrimination aimed towards you. Many racialized young professionals do feel they need racialized mentors to assist and guide them through the obstacles and barriers that they may face. My question to you is this something you could advocate for, or do you believe that this could possibly be a case of victimization?
Okay, so mentors, because I think all of us, if we were really honest, would say we had some tremendous mentors in our lives. And I can tell you that I never really had, in law at least, a female mentor. until much later in my career, or a minority mentor. So here's my perspective on it. I do think having a minority mentor can help you deal with some of those awkward political conversations of where you're feeling that you're being treated differently by reason of race or gender. But you're never going to just have one mentor. So what you need to do strategically is find people who can help teach you different things. So Ralph can teach you everything you need to know about raising funds for a political party, keeping your network strong and alive, and connecting people. You should, have a Ralph in your life.
And Ralph knows nothing about anything else, is what you were going to say.
I did not say that.
Don't worry, I'll counter it, Ralph.
And my mentors, my white male mentors, were brilliant litigators who taught me how to deal with judges, finesse clients, find practical rather than law school answers to problems. So, and then I did actually later on have female mentors who sort of kind of pushed me to get out of my comfort zone. In taking on leadership roles, or maybe doing that unit submissions a little bit more aggressively than I would have done ordinarily. So I actually think that while we all have an ideal mentor in our mind who kind of is an older version of us, the reality is most of us will not find that. And so look for different mentors. Just like you have different professors who teach you different substantive skills, you will need different mentors that teach you different life and career skills.
The legal profession is seen to be one of the least gender diverse professions. A recent poll said that 1 in 5 women have been victimized in sexual assault while in the workplace. Despite the large number of women facing sexual harassment in the workplace, majority of them will never report it. What reasons do you think sexual harassment goes mostly unreported in the workplace? And what effect do you think the Me Too movement is going to have on sexual harassment that occurs at work in industries other than film and music?
So we were just talking about that, and I'm feeling very conflicted, quite honestly, about the whole Me Too movement. I will start by saying I fully support the movement. I fully support the importance of women speaking out on important issues, and they have to have the network around them to support them to feel that it is safe to do so. It's sad that we needed a movement to get people to come forward. Now I'll get to my real opinion. And my real opinion is it's getting abused. This Me Too movement is inviting people, women largely, but not only, to make allegations, in certain instances with Patrick Brown, anonymously. Women are coming forward, some with real allegations, and great on them that they have the support and the courage and the strength to come forward. But this movement has now brought people forward to make shit up. And that is affecting the whole movement, because what's it doing to the guys? It's telling the guys that anything that you, and guys, I'm talking guys like Ralph, anything that you've done now 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago can come percolate up to the surface because some person doesn't like something that you said to them of recent day, and you decide, oh, I'm going to talk about in 1986 when Ralph Lean did X, Y, or Z, and ruin the reputation of a very respectable, honorable person. So I say I'm conflicted, and I do speak a lot about this, is let's support our women. Let's support anyone that feels that they have been victimized by anything, to feel that they have the courage to speak up in the workplace, to speak up at home, to speak up amongst your friends. Because harassment, sexual assault, sexual abuse, it does not only happen in the workplace. It does not only happen in the film and music industry. Yeah. It might be happening in this classroom. So the Me Too movement hopefully will help people, because if it's happening in this classroom and you are being harassed, bullied, detrimentally affected by a colleague or a classmate, you should feel that you can speak up and that the school will support you. And the same way I feel that a corporation should support you. But let's please not make this go too far. Let's let you guys be able to go out into the workplace and not be afraid to have a one-on-one meeting with a woman. Because that's what's happening now. You're probably thinking, how am I going to go and I'm a good-looking guy, I'm buff. How am I going to go and have a meeting with this pretty woman? And what if I say something she doesn't like? And then she's going to say I touched her inappropriately. It's not true. I know it's not true, but no one's going to believe me because the Me Too movement is saying, no matter what, she's right. So for that reason, let's be careful that this doesn't get out of control.
There's a part of me that says, yes, it's wrong that, if somebody is wrongfully accused, and Ralph and I happened to be talking on the day this happened with Patrick Brown, and I said to him, I hope it's true. But at the same time, I think that women have been victimized and have been sort of quietly shown the door for a long time, many years. And so if 100 men fall victim to this in the next, through this, maybe I don't feel so bad about that, right? So I'm really conflicted.
Can I jump in just on that?
Yeah,
point?
no,
Just
so that's,
one-
I'm just trying to be, I have this conversation with friends about, maybe that's, maybe it's not right, but it hasn't been right the way women have been treated for generations either. So, is it, like, I don't believe in tit for tat, but at the same time, there's a part of me that says, well, okay, so one or two people go over the line, but that doesn't mean you judge, so many women who for generations have just been disbelieved and shown the door, basically.
And that's not okay. And so I want to confirm that I agree that if the movement, but I don't think it's the movement, I think it's the movement of society to becoming better people, to let women know that they can come forward and to let males know that there's certain behaviors that are just no longer acceptable in the workplace. So going forward, I'm hoping that this movement will be changing behaviors on a go forward basis. But I'm very fussed about using today's movement to deal with matters that happened 20 and 30 years ago because maybe it wasn't okay. I mean, it wasn't okay. So let me say, my view is it wasn't okay. But at that time, it was considered okay. So we're penalizing somebody today for something that they did 25 years ago that they didn't even know wasn't okay then.
Couple of things. We are living in revolutionary times. And what I mean by that is we are seeing, almost like in real time, the change of social mores. And there are going to be victims. In every revolution, there are innocent victims. So those of you who studied history know that there is no victimless revolution, and we just need to be aware of that. The question was, why does, or up until this point in time, and I think even continuing, why is harassment in general underreported? And harassment in the workplace in particular relies upon a power dynamic. Most people, there's a cute guy in accounting and he makes a pass at you, but you're kind of seeing somebody else. That's not harassment. That's just kind of, and then the guy in accounting realizes you're not interested, so he goes away. That happens, hopefully, if you're lucky, a few times in your life, right? It becomes harassment when you don't feel safe at work, when you feel that a condition of your work is putting up with really awful behavior. And that's when it crosses a line. And I think that we forget that there is a power dynamic in place. If you think about Harvey Weinstein, that was a classic power dynamic, a well-connected, wealthy, well-regarded Hollywood person who can make or break your career. There just happens to be a few very ugly conditions that are attached to it. And it's interesting that society and the media only started believing those accusers when very successful, powerful women in their own right started calling Harvey Weinstein on it. So it wasn't the ingenue, the young kid from Duluth who wants to make a break in Hollywood, who was saying, oh, well, who believes her? But people with incredible credibility and power who called them out. I mean, a lot of people were saying, oh, it's only wealthy, good-looking, affluent white people, and it happens to people of color too. Well, the reason why the movement succeeded is powerful women used their power to articulate what was going on, and they used their credibility essentially to create a social change. So why? Because of the power dynamic. How do you change that power dynamic? You make it clear, and I think here Gowling's is, kind of at the curve or one of the leaders from the top down, that this is not behavior that we tolerate. This is not who we are. You may be the top biller in a section. You may be hot stuff in some weird area of law, but if you cross this line, you can go elsewhere because this is not who we are.
Being in such a large organization, have you ever faced discrimination in the workplace solely because of your gender? Also, being female and obviously caring about how us females are treated. In your opinion, what do you think are some ways businesses should adopt to increase gender equality in the workplace?
I will say that I, like most women of my generation and above, will say there has been at least one instance of discrimination in our careers. Hopefully there's not many, but typically we all have suffered one, hopefully not too large. And I would be pleased to share with you the situation because I have an awful boss to thank for the birth of my second son. Imagine that. No, I didn't sleep with him.
Okay.
Well, look, I was kind of walking in that direction here. So I was a vice president at the time, and I was told by my president, so I won't identify him by name, but I have no problems identifying him by the misbehavior that he did. And he had said to me on numerous occasions, I don't know why you even want to work here. I don't even know why you want a VP, be a VP. You should be at home, and you should be at home with your son. And, you have a young son at home. And I don't know why you want this, and I don't know. So it wasn't overt. But it was all these niggly comments that were being made to me. And I knew under his leadership, I would never get promoted. I would stay at the VP level. I would not become a senior vice president. I would not become general counsel because in his crazy view, and by the way, he was a man of color. So again, it's not always the white guys, okay? And he really made me feel that because I was a woman, I wasn't going to progress. But I loved my job, and I loved the organization that I was in. And I decided, well, I want more kids. So you know what? Screw this. I'm going to get pregnant, and then I'm going to go on a mat leave. And I betcha that by the time I get back from my mat leave, they're going to have this dude figured out. And I was right. So I have him to thank because I did exactly that. I ended up getting pregnant. Of course, I wanted more children, but I did get pregnant probably about 1.5 years sooner than I thought I would. And I absolutely did it because I wanted to go on a maternity leave, because I didn't want to walk away from a job that I loved. I didn't know how to get away from a boss that was so awful. I did not have great champions around me, which, coming back to the importance of mentors, champions, and there's a distinction between mentors and champions, which we can also get into that conversation, but the champion is the person that goes out on a limb for you, helps to promote you, versus a mentor helps you come up with the ideas yourself, helps with introductions and all those things. I didn't have a champion who said to my president, why are you treating her that way? She's better than the guys. They didn't, and it's not because they didn't think that way, it's that they just didn't. And after my mat leave, when I came back, and back then we didn't have year-long mat leaves.
6 months, right?
I went for 4 months.
Okay.
I think 6 months was allowed, but I only took 4 months. I probably would have taken 6 months, except he was fired. So then I said, all right. Moral of the story, I went back to my position. The new president recognized my skill sets, my expertise, and I was promoted within 6 months to senior vice president, and my career flourished after that. So I'm not saying run away from the problems, because that's a little bit what this story sounds like. It sounds like, oh, you were discriminated, so you kind of ran home and hid for 4 months and then decided to come back. No, it takes 9 months to cook a baby. So I still endured this for 9 or 10 months. Then I went off on the mat leave, but it allowed me to keep my sanity, and I didn't leave a job that I loved. And that is the point I want you to please take away from this, is that if you believe in yourself and you believe in your position, then fight for what you believe in, because you are in the right, not them.
So in an interview you did a few months ago, you stressed the importance of having a life outside of your work and how you love your job, but your family much more. After reading on the difficulty many of those face in the legal field, many of those in the legal field face when it comes to fulfilling work-life balance, how have you managed to balance your life outside of work while also making several advancements throughout your career?
That was one of my favorite interviews to do, because I think that was the one about the advice that I would give students. And the advice, my number one piece of advice that I give students always is the importance of work-life balance, because every aspect of your life affects the other aspect. So if you are not happy at work, then you're taking it home, and you're not going to be a pleasant person to be with at home. And similarly, if you feel that you are missing out on the important things at home, you're not going to be as successful at work. So I start at that place because I made a very, very conscious decision early in my career. And it is something that I have held on to very firmly. And it is something that anyone that I mentor, I require them to do. And it is, don't be ashamed to want to have a life. Because that's why we were born. We were born to enjoy life, and life does not only mean go to work and make a lot of money, because money doesn't buy happiness. A holistic life buys happiness.
It helps.
Pardon me?
Money helps.
Well, money helps. Of course money helps. But at the end of the day, money is also the root of all evil. In order to get a balanced life, don't be ashamed. So this is a practical example, and it's something that I do. It is something that is in my Outlook calendar. So my sons were high school and varsity athletes. I don't miss their football games. I just don't. And when they were young and they were in Pee Wee and Adam and all those other things playing hockey, I didn't miss their hockey games either. And when they were this big, their hockey games were at 4:30. Well, that's not really conducive to being a successful Bay Street lawyer. So I'm not a Bay Street lawyer. I found something that enabled me to be able to do what was important to me, and that was find an occupation or a workplace that was open to it. So everyone knows Tuesdays and Thursdays during football season, high school football, I won't be here from 2:30 on. It doesn't mean the work isn't getting done. It doesn't mean people can't reach me at 6 o'clock after the football game is over, but that's where I am. And I overplay the role. And I overplay it so that people of your generation will say, well, if she does it, then that's okay. I can go to my kid in nursery school's Christmas party or Christmas caroling, because that's important. Your kids remember that. Your spouse, your partner, they remember if you had dinner with them only once last week or not at all, or 4 times. So I established it because I made it a priority. And if you don't make it a priority, it's very easy to get yourself sucked into your job because you want to succeed. Similarly, it's very easy to get sucked into your family, and that is a little bit more for women, but I say the same for men. We carry guilt. I mean, I feel guilty, or I did. Now I don't carry any guilt with my children, but I felt badly that they used to come home to a nanny. Remember, we talked a lot about this last year. And I'm not ashamed that I have a nanny. And I am not ashamed that my nanny has helped raise my children from the time they were born until, well, now she's helping me raise my husband. But anyway.
Is she succeeding?
Pardon me?
Is she succeeding? Raising your husband?
Well, she at least cooks for him,
Okay,
so
fine.
it keeps him happy. And I'm glad you asked that question, because you shouldn't feel ashamed to buy help. And what I mean by that is the only way I was able to become a successful senior executive throughout the course of my career and still raise happy, well-established children was because I had somebody that would be able to cook for us and drive carpool for me, because I couldn't do those things, but it was important to me. So yes, I have a nanny. I spend a big part of my own salary on compensating the nanny, but it allows me to do what I love. And so find whatever works for you, but find it. Don't find yourself 6 years past and you lose your partner because they're sick and tired of you always being at work.
Okay, Joy, I'm interested in work-life balance.
I have none, so. I'm really bad at work-life balance, but I think I see work-life balance as more of a sort of a continuum. So, I mean, I love my job, and but I love my family, so, and I have one, fortunately. And I think I'm a good role model for both my children who understand the benefits of hard work. They're both very hardworking people. So I'm proud of that. So, you know, I think that when I say it's a continuum, I mean that, you know, we all find ways, and I think the workplace is very amenable to you finding ways, particularly, I mean, obviously, as you get into more senior roles, sort of saying, okay, well, I don't need to tell anybody where I am for 3 hours during the day, right, when I'm getting my hair done, which I haven't done recently, or, you know, whatever, right, where I'm doing what I'm doing. It's not really anybody's business as long as the work gets done. And I think that generally most organizations are working towards that sort of thing, that they will, you know, if you know, have to go home and have dinner with your children, and that's always been my, you know, with the people who work, it's part of my team. You know, if you have to leave at 4 o'clock because you've got to go somewhere, it's fine with me. Like, as long as the work gets done, I don't care where you are, right? And if I need to reach you, if you can be available, but, you know, be respectful as well. So I think that workplaces are moving towards that and understanding that people need to, I mean, we're all different, and some of us want to work more and want to work less, but I think workplaces are getting much more amenable to allowing people to set their schedules the way that's going to work for them, because they want to keep good people. It is in the organization's best interest to keep good people. It is a huge cost to lose a good person, right? So when you decide that you have to pack in 6 or 7 years because your job is just too much for you and you can no longer manage the demands of your family and your work, they are losing. And I think more and more employers are beginning to understand that.
I don't know that I'm really good at work-life balance. So one of the things that I tell people is your spouse is really key to this. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, when you look at that good-looking young person across a crowded room and your eyes meet and the sparks fly, you know, there's some really hard discussions that you also need to have as to whether you're amenable. I mean, there were a lot of guys that I dated that just weren't really keen on having a spouse that was as ambitious and as driven as I was. And my husband, who's a real type B personality, who kind of keeps me, who's calm, unless he really blows, in which case he's like Mount Vesuvius. And well, you know, I'm more of a,
What a surprise.
Yeah. And so we've kind of worked it out, right? Where I'm really the one who's much more ambitious about my career, and I love what I do. Not always the number of hours I put in, and not always when I have to do it, but I love it. And a couple of other things that you have to sort of is define work-life balance for yourself, and then really make that important. Whether that means, you know, scheduling gym time, whether that means scheduling, I had one piece of great advice from a mentor, which is, I don't care if you've booked a vacation or not, book a vacation time off now. So as you're booking your examinations for discovery and your court appearances, you know that you're going to be gone in the first 2 weeks of April and the last 2 weeks of September. And then the shoulders, the week before and the week after, don't book anything, because there is nothing worse than being on a beach somewhere having to review transcripts, because that is not what your husband wants when you've spent good money to go on a vacation. The other thing is, I think you have to be a little bit realistic of what your expectations are. If you want a job where you show up at 9 o'clock, you have an hour's lunch off, and you leave at 4:30, you're probably not going to want to be a senior partner at our firm. I'm just being really realistic. You know, I'm servicing clients from India to Denmark. You know, even if they don't necessarily want the answer right away, they want to be acknowledged that, you know, it's under control. There's sacrifices you make in the evening and early hours to do what I do, and I'm okay with it. And I fully respect if you're saying, Neena, that's crazy. Why are you doing this? That's awful. I would never do that. But don't, like, then find another job. Do what you did, which is to say, you know what, Bay Street's not the right place for me, but there are other places that are. But I love what I do.
You are in a profession where you are servicing clients, and the clients' calls come in at any hour. They are in any jurisdiction. Versus the job that I have, and probably more similar to the job you have, Joy, is that we certainly have clients but they're internal. And the work has to get done.
Yes.
But I might go to the football game, just picking up on my old example, and then I'm going to work from 8 p.m. to midnight. I'm going to do my work.
Yeah.
But I don't have to respond within a time constraint because it just has to be done for tomorrow. So these are all factors I think you have to
But you have to be
into.
realistic, like not all, like, you know, and so I want to also go to that earlier example, you know, there was a question about the pay gap. Not all of that pay gap is due to discrimination.
That's right.
Some of that pay gap is due to women, mostly women, not just women. I've seen some men do it as well. In fact, increasingly, men are asking the question of work-life balance. Increasingly, men are demanding it as well, which is a really good sign, and choosing jobs which, although they may not have the same income potential, have more flexibility in terms of family priority. The other thing I also say is, you know, I'm going to be in this career, I've already been in this career for 30 years, and I anticipate that I'll be in this career for another 10 years. Things change over that career. And so your beginning years in law are hard. And this goes to an earlier conversation we had before the session started, which is law school teaches you bupkis about practicing law. And I will go toe-to-toe with any dean in any law school in this province, in this country.
Other than the future Ryerson Law School, that will be very different.
I said, you know, okay, fine. You know, okay, fine.
I'm on the committee with Abner, you know, we got to promote it.
Your first, and I will tell you truthfully, I was a very good law student. And I came into first year articling, and I realized that the junior secretary with a 6-week law secretarial course had more practical knowledge than I did. This is not a good thing, especially when you look at your student debt compared to her student debt. And so the first 2 years or 3 years post law school are really brutal. You're learning all the stuff you thought you knew, but you really didn't. And it's hard. And the first 2 or 3 years after in any professional career are hard. Then for some reason, it all clicks, and you kind of get it. And then you take a whole layer of stress off yourself, and you are in an incredibly marketable position because you know what you're doing, right? And you then have the ability to really sort of think about, what do I want to do? Do I want to be crazy like Neena and be in Bay Street? Do I want to do something else?
Or you could just be crazy like me, period.
Okay, you can be crazy like Marni, like, yes, exactly. And you will have a lot more opportunities to create work-life balance.
You're a very accomplished lawyer, and I think much of that is attributed to the fact that not only do you specialize in law, but you're also a business strategist, and you're an amazing relationship builder. And I guess, as you do know, Ryerson is hoping to have their own law school, and the curriculum, I think, is really what's going to set Ryerson's law school apart from the others. So the curriculum, it's going to have an emphasis on technology and some coding and just the business of law. So my question is, you know, how important is learning about business and technology in law school? And do you think that this unique education is going to give Ryerson law graduates an edge in the field?
I have absolutely no doubt whatsoever that the new model that is being presented to, or that was successful in front of the Federation of Law Societies, and that is now being presented more locally. Ryerson, like every other faculty in Ryerson, is innovative, is ahead of the curve, is experiential. And so the types of learnings that are being put into the curriculum, and it's early days. I mean, things are conceptual right now. Your prof will be able to actually explain more about the program. It will add an advantage, I have no doubt, because the business of law, just like the business of everything else, is moving towards artificial intelligence, is moving towards computing, is moving towards technology. There are likely going to be less law jobs out there because of the advances in technology. So what this law school is doing is taking the best of all worlds, and it is using technology in a variety of learnings to enable you to go out into the world, into new careers that we probably aren't even dreaming about right now, because they'll be that new when the initial class graduates in 2023 or 2024. There's going to be jobs that we didn't anticipate. So I am really excited about this law school. I support other law schools as well. And there you learn what I'm going to call traditional learning. You need to learn about a tort, and you need to learn about the Constitution, and you need to learn a little bit about criminal law. But learn how to do things. I mean, your example was perfect. The 6-week, the secretary knew more than you, like, absolutely, because she or he, but probably she at the time, was learning by osmosis. And I think one thing that I attribute huge success for our future law school is the success of the law practice program that Ryerson started as a pilot project 3 years ago. That program was I don't know if you're familiar with it, but essentially it is, if Julia was here, she'd talk a little bit more about it. It was an alternative to articling. And I love the LPP program because the first 4 months of it is practical. So you would be in a mock firm, and you were getting mock files, but you actually had to go out and act like a lawyer. You had to draft the pleadings if it was a litigation, or you had to draft the will if it was an estates, and so on and so forth. So Ryerson was so ahead of the curve with the LPP program that I am hoping and thinking that many of the successes and challenges that came out of the LPP program are now going to be incorporated into the law school. So the students that we graduate from the law school are going to be equipped to go articling in the same manner that the LPP students before them got the experience. And the LPP program, just in closing, was very heavily driven by technology as well. So much so that us faculty, we were behind the students a little bit because they were so comfortable. As I'm looking, you are all working on your laptops and pulling things up. It's actually still a challenge for us.
I think law has been taught with a 19th century mentality for far too long. And what do I mean by that? I want you to go back actually just to the pre-World War I, and actually even up to World War II. You could actually become a lawyer and never go to law school. And you have to understand that, because it was understood that law, the way you learned law in the very good old days, was you literally sat with a senior lawyer in an office and essentially job shadowed him, and it was a him, for 2 or 3 years. And then you actually, would get sent on small things and then bigger things. And then after a while, you would go out for dinner, get drunk, and you'd get called to the bar. That was the old model. And then they said, well, maybe we should actually have some substantive knowledge, and so they started teaching at Osgoode Hall, which is, you see, not far from here, the court, now the Court of Appeal and the Divisional Court. And they had substantive courses about principles of law. That was never intended to replace that 2 or 3 years of job shadowing. However, as we came into modern times, and we had a proliferation of law schools, people focused on the knowledge of substantive law, to the detriment of the skills. And I've had deans of law say, well, you know, we're not a trade school. People don't really always want to be a lawyer. Being a lawyer changes. They'll learn that when they graduate. I'm mentally thinking, well, why don't you pay me the $25,000 in tuition if that's going to be your approach? You would never graduate an engineer or a doctor with the same lack of practical skills that you graduate a law student. So technology is important, but I would really love to see a curriculum that moves away from the case law methodology where you read 50-page cases to try to discern what the law is, to almost like a civil code approach. These are the commonly accepted principles that you need to know in the beginning. If you are in a $5 million fight, you're going to go and research it to the nth degree, but you need to know these basic rules. Now, why don't we see how you apply these basic rules to practical question 1, 2, 3, and 4? And I think you guys, if you take that type of course, you'll come out, quite frankly, either able to start your own law firm, servicing communities that never could afford a lawyer because, you know, they're not going to pay $400 an hour for, you know, advice from us. And you're also going to be much more useful articling students and lawyers. So I really am aching for Ryerson to get its act together and Law Society to get its act together and for you guys to open. And then I get to come and be a guest lecturer, right, Ralph?
Yes, you do.
Okay.
All right, you spent the majority of your early career working for a small boutique firm in Hamilton after passing the bar exam in 1983. Since 97, you've worked as an in-house counsel for publicly traded private companies. What prompted you to make the move from working in a small boutique firm to working in-house as an in-house counsel for these larger publicly traded companies?
The main motivator for me was that, you know, working in a small regional firm, there was a limit on the quality of work that I was going to be able to be exposed to. And I wanted to do bigger deals. And, you know, the small law firm that I worked for was not like a major law firm in Toronto where you do, you know, $100 million deals. And I wanted to do $100 million deals. So I went in-house where I could do $100 million deals. And so they're not all $100 million deals, but it's fun to be able to do them. And in fact, actually, I still love to do the small deals because you're dealing with usually, you know, sort of, it's a much more hands-on experience because often it's directly with the seller and their lawyer, and you have more of that sort of hands-on. When it's a bigger deal, they tend to sort of hide more behind their big law firm lawyers and stuff. But that was.
I
really
recommend you hide behind your big law firm, and it should be Gowling's here.
But that was really the motivator, and you know, I liked my experience. I did a lot of different things. When I was in my early years, I was actually I did litigation, and then I moved to corporate, and so I've changed a lot over the years.
So my question for Neena is, there was a lot of backlash with the acquittal of GN Gomeshi case. So many people have believed that harassment victims should avoid pursuing legal ramifications as it will further victimize them. Given your extensive background in employment and human rights law, what is your opinion on Bill 132 that was introduced in 2016, imposing new duties on employers regarding harassment in the workplace? Do you think it will help prevent harassment in the early stages?
So Bill 132 was a change in the approach to harassment, and it made it an occupational health and safety regulatory matter. It requires all workplaces to have policies against harassments, but more importantly, to have an actual protocol as to who does what. Like, it's a pretty detailed if they get a complaint of harassment. There's also a pretty good code of practice. Actually, it's an excellent code of practice, which the government has put out as a sample. You don't have to use it, but it is a really good cheat sheet, you know, a precedent, if you will. And so it changed the approach from being a human rights complaint protocol to an occupational health and safety. You know, you have a responsibility to make sure that your worker isn't injured by your equipment and poisoned by the chemicals in your workplace. You also have a responsibility to make sure your workers are not harassed in the workplace. I actually think it has made a difference, by the way, because there's mandatory training, and also the Joint Health and Safety Committees and managers have to be trained. So I think it has helped raise the profile of the issue. I do also want to address your lead-in about Jian Ghomeshi. And I think that what it shows is the criminal standard of proof beyond a reasonable doubt, for many reasons, is accepted as a high standard. And as a lawyer, I accept it because the state is actually going to imprison, fine, and permanently put a record against somebody if they are criminally convicted. And so we demand a very high standard of proof before someone is criminally convicted. And so I actually don't think that the criminal courts are a good place for what I would call, forgive me for using this expression, garden variety workplace harassment. Now, the Jian Ghomeshi case had layers and layers about it that were very, very odd, including communications amongst the complainants and communications between the complainants and Jian Ghomeshi even after the assault, which in my mind rendered the verdict of not guilty the correct one.
On behalf
really
of
gonna-
Ryerson, I want to thank the spectacular panel. You just guys hit it out of the park, and thanks for coming, and we have a gift from Avner. Thank you.